So the release date for the Yu Yu Hakusho Netflix show is confirmed for December 14th. And to be completely honest with you guys, with the recent success of the One Piece Netflix show, I have some optimism for this. And if you guys remember a little bit less than a year ago when I first reported that there was going to be a Yu Yu Hakusho live adaptation, I will openly admit I was rather pessimistic. And the reason why is because, as a Dragon Ball fan, which I'm assuming the majority of you who are watching this that watch my content regularly are familiar with, we Dragon Ball fans have gotten the short end of the stick, and if this wasn't on YouTube I would have used harsher words. We've gotten the short end of the stick when it comes to our favorite franchise going into directions where there's so much uncertainty and just poor direction. I mean, we've gone through Dragon Ball GT, Dragon Ball Evolution, Dragon Ball Super, and with Dragon Ball Magic coming out, we once again get into this feeling of where is this going to take the franchise? Is it gonna, revitalize it, or is it just gonna keep pushing it in a direction that we as OG fans don't feel? And because of that, and because of other failed live-action Netflix shows, I mean, there's so many that we can go into, but there have been so many animes that have been tried to go into live action, and quite honestly, guys, I just haven't been impressed with quite a bit of them. And not even just anime, just other things too, like if you look at Avatar: The Last Airbender and other things like that, like, certain things just don't look or perform as well with live action. And because of that, my initial reaction to this was, oh boy, here we go again. I felt if Yu Yu Hakusho was going to make a return, that it would be best to either have an anime continuation of where it left off, or you just essentially reboot the entire series. And with Togashi giving new direction and adding more towards it, I feel like that would be a refreshing experience. But very different from what we have with One Piece. We have to point out something here, guys, and one of the creators that I frequently make videos with talked about this. Oda from One Piece had a lot of overseeing with the Netflix project, and even though I haven't fully completed the One Piece Netflix show, I have seen that it's gotten quite a bit of good reception, and from what I've seen, it has very, very good effects, because the budget was very good for this. Now, with this show, guys, one of the issues is that this show is going to come out in approximately 2 months, a little bit more than 2 months from now, and we haven't had any trailer yet. Pretty much we've only just gotten some concept art, and we just know a little bit about who's producing it, but other than that, this show is in quite the unknown. And the problem with this, guys, is that Yu Yu Hakusho is one of those OG animes that you kind of just don't want to be touched. It's one of those things where it was so good the way that it was that you kind of don't want the risk of seeing what would happen with it. And if you are going to take a risk with it, at least reanimate it or, have it in a more familiar format. But to take an anime that was essentially just not really having much activity, I mean, Yu Yu Hakusho had some OVAs that came out about half a decade ago, which were manga, snippets that were originally there, and I felt that those were actually really good. I really liked the new animation style, and I did feel, and I was talking to Mozilla Volpix about this, that if they were to recontinue Yu Yu Hakusho with this animation style, I think it would be fantastic, because I thought the animation was great, and even though, I mean, it was basically just telling stories that we already knew, it was nice to see that, so that was really the last thing that Yu Yu Hakusho came out with. So we go from a huge drought of, Yu Yu Hakusho's not really on the air anymore, because the majority of us who watched Yu Yu Hakusho growing up remember it on Toonami and Adult Swim. And then we got the OVAs, and that's pretty much it. Yu Yu Hakusho is just kind of one of those anime classics that fans secretly love and have a lot of admiration for the series, but because it just hasn't really had anything, it kind of just exists in the minds of fans, but it really hasn't had any adaptations to it. So when you go from that big drought to, hey, we're going to do a live action show, it just feels a little abrupt from the direction that we're going in. And to be honest with you guys, the thing about Yu Yu Hakusho is I feel like with a really good budget, things can be done well. But I also feel, like with Netflix and One Piece specifically, I'm very curious about the direction of the story that they're going to go into, because, you know, the One Piece live-action show is already confirmed to have another season. And with this Yu Yu Hakusho show, it's always funny saying Yu Yu Hakusho show. It's like you gotta say show twice. But the interesting thing about this is that Yu Yu Hakusho is considerably shorter than One Piece. So if you can pace out a lot of the events effectively, you could actually finish this series much easier and much more effective than you ever could for a show like One Piece, and even a show like Dragon Ball, if Dragon Ball were to get a live-action show. And I already made a video talking about why I feel it would be very risky to do a Dragon Ball live-action show. But ultimately, guys, I feel like the biggest thing about it is Yu Yu Hakusho has such special effects and such special types of characters, like when you have Hiei with all of the eyes over his body and going into Demon World and all of these different things, that I feel like this show would have to have a comparable budget to One Piece's show to really be good. And I don't have any research that confirms the amount of money that went into this. I looked it up online, I spent several hours researching it, and the thing about this show is that there's very, very, very little information about this, which I feel is a very bad omen. You know, the fact that you have to dig so much just to get little pieces of information and there's no trailer, all of just has and gives off a vibe of this is just going to be something like a side project that they kind of like half worked into, but didn't really like look into it that deeply. And considering the fact that there's no confirmation of Togashi having an involvement in this, this is going to be one of those things where it's most likely going to go in its own original direction, which is going to piss off fans, because let's just be honest, guys. Whatever you create a live-action adaptation, or whatever you redo something in your own direction, you always take that huge risk of, are you going to piss fans off? Because fans worship their series like the Bible, and Yu Yu Hakusho is one of those series like that, and because fans have been so starved of Yu Yu Hakusho for so long, I feel like whatever Yu Yu Hakusho fans are out there are probably gonna watch this just because seeing the name Yu Yu Hakusho is just gonna, you know, give you goosebumps, because you haven't had that vibe of watching Yu Yu Hakusho in such a while. But when you really think about it, I feel like this would be a fantastic live-action show if it's worked out correctly. I feel like, you know, seeing Yusuke fight against Toguro, fighting against the Sapis, and even when we get into, like, the Sensui arc, I mean, Yu Yu Hakusho gets really, really, really deep. And one thing that I love about Yu Yu Hakusho more than anything else is you can't go wrong with this show, because if you just slightly model the original direction of the characters, Yu Yu Hakusho has a fantastic four-man core of characters that I feel works so perfectly together and better than most anime I've seen. Yusuke, Hiei, Kurama, and Kuwabara just have such unique fighting styles, such unique characters, such unique backstories. They're just all unique. Like, each one of those four characters could, like, have an entire show written about them all specifically. Like, I feel like because the cast of Yu Yu Hakusho is so powerful, I feel like this is where the show might at least be decent at the very least, because if you just have any show with those four characters, they just have such perfect synchronicity that I feel like you'd have to do a really awful job on camera in order to really mess that up. And as a result of that, I do have some hopes for this. Now, ultimately, when it's all said and done, I am going to review every episode of this. I thought about this for a while, and I understand that the majority of you who watch my content, you know, watch for Dragon Ball, but I am aware and capable of talking about other things. It's just, you know, obviously based off of YouTube performance, you guys want me to talk about Dragon Ball more than anything else, but even though it's kind of ironic because I started this channel off as a Yu-Gi-Oh channel, and then kind of just started, like, the Dragon Ball YouTubing movement, like, before anybody else was even doing this. So it's kind of funny that a guy that tried to be a Yu-Gi tuber ended up being, like, the first Dragon Ball YouTuber. Isn't it funny how that works? Life is really interesting. You look for a certain type of ore, but then you end up finding a new type of mineral that nobody's ever heard of. It's just funny how life can work that way. But I do plan on talking about it. I do plan on, you know, seeing your feedback. We could even do, more discussions about this in the future. And I feel like if this works out, guys, I mean, I really feel like the gods are on our side for this. I mean, the gods, the demons of the Yu Yu Hakusho realm. I really feel like if this show works out, it will be awesome. But I feel like it's going to be very hit or miss. I feel like the middle ground is really where the big weakness comes in.